sector, and I was wondering who would like to take this question first. Who wants to? I think you're looking really, you really want to answer this one, don't you?
Yeah, okay. That's a long answer, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess it boils down a lot to making the activities more enjoyable and be able to nudge people in different directions that you would usually be able to do. So I guess most of the games that we've seen today and that we've seen today is very much about trying to move people in different directions or make them interact in ways that they wouldn't normally like to do. I guess there's also more than that. I think that, but that's not really as such game related per se. I mean, with all the stuff you get from digitalization, like tracking and adaptive behavior and feedback mechanisms, but that's not really per se a part of the game mechanics. I mean, games is really about constructing roads that you can bring people to different places in ways they wouldn't normally do. And find it amusing or fun or engaging and go back to it again. But I guess there's also, stuff like distractors, where you're basically so immersed, which is a different part of it. I think there's really a lot of ways to use this. I think we're just seeing the early attempts of basically putting up a game interface and then having people do exercises. But I think there's going to be much more creativity around it in a couple of years. Also, when medical society start thinking with game glasses on rather than game developers thinking about medicine, which is not always a pretty picture.
Do you think then is the technology is going to drive the innovation, or do you think it's just more the framework and the ideas which are going to drive the innovation?
I think it's the mainstreaming and the bringing together of the content experts. So in that sense, it's the ideas and the creativity. I think that a lot of the technology that we see now, well, it's not new in that sense. We're seeing better precision, ease of use and stuff like that, but they're not necessarily that new. So it's more about figuring out how we can actually use this in the right ways, and I think that very much involves that medical people also get some thinking going on, and of course they should talk to game developers, but and some experience, obviously, and some good case studies and stuff going on. So
I was going to ask actually a perspective from Oho as well. What's your thoughts on this sort of issue?
My thought is that the doctors and the nurses and all the people working in the hospital, they don't have experience with the technology, and that gives a lot of problems with using those stuff in the hospital. That's one of the big issues for the developer.
Would you agree? Is that would you agree with that kind of perspective?
Yes, I think we have some traditional ways of, for instance, informing our patients and some traditional ways of treating our patients. And I think we'll still be doing that, but we are always looking for new ways to do things. And I think combining game and health could be a new way of informing, for instance, informing the patients. And I think it's important that we offer the patients different kind of ways to get, for instance, information on diseases, about rehabilitation, so they can choose in what kind of way they want to have the information.
But sometimes it's important that it's not us that choose that. It's better for the. It's better when the children or when the grown-ups they choose themselves, because then they are choosing what they need to know.
Speak a bit louder.
Yes, I don't really know what games can offer the health sector, but I think instead of doing market analysis of what do you think you need, we should think like Apple did when they invented the iPad. They made an iPad no one knew they needed, and now it's sold in several million versions, and the new one is probably on the way tonight. So we don't really know what we need, but if companies can invent things we need, we will buy them. But I could think, for instance, in diets for diabetes patients, for gluten intolerance or allergic, and so on. You could make a game, for instance, if I travel around the world and see the menus in France and Italy and China and Thailand and so on, what can I substitute my Danish food with? Could be an example of what could be sold to people with different dietary requirements, for instance, diabetes. But
you mentioned something there before you jump in. You're saying that you would rather the companies to bring in the ideas and information. You put a point on this.
Yeah.
So hand over, sorry.
Yes. Is it working?
Just
Okay. I think the problem is very much that these two sectors don't know each other. And it's a problem of articulation. And I think it's very correct when you say that you shouldn't do market research. You have to bring out prototypes to find out what is needed within the sector. I think a sort of combining the user-driven innovation and design-driven innovation is the key to opening up different sectors. And then I think we need very strong concepts in development here, because we are trying to combine two different rationalities. The rationality of a game where the outcome should be winning, and at the end of the day you could say that rehabilitation is also about winning, gaining your health back, but these rationalities are different, and therefore we need strong concepts in our development teams where we can rationality of the health sector into the gaming industry and vice versa. So I think that's one of the major challenges if we want games within this sector to be something else than just demonstrators or symbolic games.
I agree, but I see a big problem because I have been working with a lot of different things that have been invented for a long time. And I have seen a lot of that stuff just put into a closet after a short time because nobody knew how to handle it.
Well, that's a general problem. It's because when you talk about innovation, the problem is not inventing the items or the artifacts or the games. It's changing the practice, and you could say, is the health sector ready for a sort of gamification? Because very often it will call for a change in the way we work or in the way we organize. So otherwise it would just be sort of a small symbolic items within the sector.
We're just hopefully starting up on a new project with Region Zealand, and one of the big challenges right there is basically how they think about security and data, which means that, because a big part of this is tracking and feedback loops and rewards tied up to that, but if we can't really use that data, and it's very difficult to us get access to it, and every time we need to request it, we need to use the NemID and plug that in, then it just gets kind of insane. So there's also some infrastructural things that, I haven't experienced in other sectors that, where things are more sensitive, that, as game developers and developers in general, we need to kind of be more appreciative of that and find ways around that. I think that some of the things, we've done a lot of stuff in the educational system where we've also talked about this stuff for a lot of years. And the same thing is really happening, that teachers like the idea, they think it's innovative, but they end up not using it that much. I think that there's a big difference in the health sector, I hope, in the sense that in the school system you have what you could call very slow feedback loops. So if you fuck up the kids, you will know in 15 years. And that means that it's very, very difficult to get new practice going because it's difficult to see if it's better or working. And in the health sector, at least for some areas, there's a very direct feedback because, either they make it or they don't make it, right? So and I'm thinking that would be really good. And it also have another thing, which is that in the education system, the return of investment is very kind of difficult. You know, do they really get smarter and more motivated? Whereas again, because we can track more directly in the health sector, it's much easier to say, okay, this is actually 10% faster or better or less critical errors and stuff, and then it actually makes sense to do this. So in that regard, I'm very positive in terms of, you know, objective and rational thinking actually being able to win over people when these things start coming out. But obviously it's not gonna, I mean, changing practices and changing people is the most difficult thing in the world. So, I mean, it's not gonna happen quickly, I think.
And I have a question for you, actually.
I actually think that the staff at the hospital is quite ready for using this. I think the challenge is the development part and bringing the knowledge from the staff to the people who can develop. And I think another challenge is the business case in it. I think the reason for people to go in and develop, you need some priorities in the political system to work with this, and I think it will come, but it is still a challenge, I think.
Yeah, and well, it's not actually on the question thing, but it's the finance thing, actually. I mean, you've talked about these companies bringing these ideas to you and then you sort of seeing the use of them, but actually the cost of doing that is quite high. So as a commercial enterprise, without actually having any guarantees of getting feedback, I mean, how do you feel, I mean, from your perspective, investing money and time into these developments with the whim that maybe they'll be picked up by the hospital?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're looking for the business case, of course, all the time. Of course, we would like to do something good for people, but still, if we can't see kind of return of our investment, there's no reason for us to do it. And I'm pretty sure Simon will say the same.
I'm just not as smart as you. I do sometimes anyway.
Well, yeah, that's up to us. Okay.
Let's moving on. The next question is, what is the anatomy of a serious health game? And I think, Simon, do you want to answer this one, do you think?
That was the one I crossed out when you said it. There's a medical term in there, I'm not sure.
There is a medical term in there. Well, let's go to Gunnar. I mean, do you think you can answer this one? Everyone's shying away from this one.
No, but I think, I mean, the tricky part is that, you know, I mean, it is... I mean, we are basically asking what a serious health game is, right? Yeah, so I mean that I mean it can be very, very, very broad. I mean, and even defining what a game is is it can go all the way to visualization, go more towards simulations, go more to basically distractions, immersion, virtual worlds. So there's a big space around e-learning that's actually all kind of health games. So I think it's a very broad thing, yeah.
Moving on swiftly,
Yeah.
I think. I may add, I didn't write that question. What do technologies offer health games? And I think we kind of touched briefly upon this, but about what, whether it's the technology which is going to drive the innovation at all. And I just wondering what your thoughts are on to this.
Oh, that's a good question, actually. Well, I don't believe that the technology should be the driving part. Actually, I think that the concept itself should be the driving part. If you look at our product, it's not really... Well, 5 years ago, GPS was a novel word. Everyone was interested in GPS technology. Everyone today uses GPS, and it's integrated in the everyday usage. But our concept is the key driver. It's not the use of GPS technology itself. So what I'm trying to say is that the technology is just part of it as a pencil and paper. It's just there, and you should find a way to use it. The concept, the way the game is put together, is the key element. Yeah, I hope.
But of course you can start discussing what do you mean by technologies, but I won't start that discussion here. But I think technologies are very important because they are a sort of tool of reflection. When you start reflecting on how could we develop education, the technology became a sort of tool for you in that process. And the same thing will and are happening within the health sector, that when you introduce new technologies, new media, you start to think, what could these offer us? And when you start to do that, you start to reflect on your own practice, and that's a way to open up for new innovations. So in that way, I think technologies offer a lot, but at the end of the day, I agree with you that basically it's about developing strong concepts for this.
I think that one of the big tendencies of these new technologies that we're seeing is basically that they expand the accessibility of some of these platforms. I mean, it makes it much more natural and intuitive to approach them, and this means that it becomes easier to, for example, approach elderly people or people not used to using computers or not using them every day, and basically just make more for a natural interaction, which also make it more easier to fit it into a lot of the rehab areas when you want people to do stuff and track them. So I mean, there's a lot of the accessibility compared to the old mouse that's very different. And most of the technologies that we're seeing now is basically about providing different interfaces and accessibility to the computer, basically. And you usually say in games development that there's 3 ways to make a new game. You can do better graphics, you can do a new concept, or you can have a new interface. That's the 3 ways to innovate. I'm not sure it's true, but that's at least a lot of people believe that. So yeah.
I think the question is a little strange, because I think we have a problem. Can technology help us? And not we have a technology. Can we find the problem? So I think it's the other way round. I have a problem. You have a technology. Can you help me with solving this problem? So it's the other way around, I think.
So you should tell us your pains, and I'll see if I can fix it.
If we have the tool.
We're going to move on to our last question. Hopefully this will sort of span out for a long time. How will games affect our view of health and illness? And I think this goes down to things like patients and conducting their own sort of health and sort of checks, because we've got technologies nowadays which are much more miniaturized, and this is why I was interested in the whole technology question, because you can get portable ultrasounds nowadays, and when the technology shrinks and you're giving more access to patients to conduct, well, it can be a bad thing and a good thing, but I was wondering what your thoughts on this whole issue of how games will affect our view of health and illness. It's not just about health.
I think we can get clever patients.
Clever patients?
Yes, because they can learn a lot in a quick way, and they can learn it in an interesting way, compared to earlier times when we passed out some information and in a short time they were outdated. Now it can be updated, and we can easily learn, even children, how to manage their diseases.
I think it's the same thing that patients become subject in their own treatment through, not necessarily through gaming itself, but also through other new technologies. You learn a lot, and you become an expert on your own disease and so on, and in that way it changes. And games also offer the thing that you can see what will happen if you don't do the things we have been discussing here in your rehabilitation process or whatever.
I agree, but I also see a big problem, because we all of us know that there are some young mothers, unge mødre, teenage moms, other different kind of groups in the Danish society, and not everyone will be clever. Some people are lost in this way.
I also agree that it's a double-edged sword in response, that you kind of you have to take care of your own health in a much more direct way than you can't just rely on authorities to monitor you and give you the advice. Much more responsibility is going to be put on yourself. So it's like yeah, it's the entire progression towards, basically nobody will serve you in the supermarket, right? I mean, it's the same now. The doctors won't serve you anymore. You have to, you do the work yourself. And I think that along a lot of the way, that makes a lot of sense. But of course, there's also these groups that will be potentially stuck in this middle and won't have the means to do that. And yeah, but I won't blame the games. They'll blame for so much other stuff. So.
Pass the microphone.
I think the patients really wants to be active and wants to be part of their own treatment. And of course, some people are not capable of doing that. And that's why, as I said before, I think this cannot, you should not let the personal contact go out of the treatment because you have a game. I think they should complement each other. So you have both. So you have a different kind of offers for the patients. I think we still need that, although we get some games.
No. Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah, exactly. It's spreading now.
But I think there are different issues in this because we recently finalized a project on spinal rehabilitation, and it seems that we at least have two different groups of patients: the ones who want to be very active and the ones who very much want to give it back to the doctor, seeing their own body as a sort of object. But the thing here is that technology also offer a sort of feedback to the staff saying, well, this patient is this kind of person. Here you need some, maybe he or she needs to be a member of a Facebook group discussing this, or he or she needs to do some gaming, or he or she needs to have a lot of personal contact. And that's another option, not within the technology.
Quick follow-up, can you actually see what are the characteristics of some of these patient groups? Because I have some stereotypes and
yeah, but we have developed now we have developed a questionnaire where a very simple one, which not is a very valid picture, but it gives a sort of general character.
There's there's actually something which actually Ben Sawyer mentioned at the Games for Health conference, and he was mentioning that it's the financial aspect of healthcare, and that governments will not be able to afford to treat the amount of people in the future. And then, so when actually putting healthcare into the hands of the patients themselves is going to have to be a necessity. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts about, is this a dangerous idea to go down, or how is this going to work necessarily? And that was a loaded question.
No, I don't think it's that dangerous, but we need to think about the weak patients, mentally, physically, and so on, because they are often lost. Those who can go on the internet themselves and are very informed when they see me are sometimes easy to handle and sometimes not, because not all information are up to date or good enough. But those who don't seek any information and maybe even can't read or write or speak another language, they are very difficult to help, and they won't start playing games. They can't do it. So it's a little difficult. But I think generally the information and games and so on will help us in most of the patients.
Do you not think, though, that the patients you're talking about will be, are they not easier to engage with gameplay because you're not having to use language necessarily in gaming, or are you saying that they would not get gaming in at all?
No, the strong and clever patients are easy informed about where to find games and information on the internet, but all the other patients are difficult, and they have always been difficult to manage.
yeah. I'm just there's two very fundamental different ways of thinking about health games, and there's the gamification perspective, and then there's the serious games perspective. And I think that it's very different how they appeal to different target groups and different patient groups, because this is a bit stereotype, but serious games would probably be for the stronger patients, because they require that they set themselves in the driver's seat and that they take control and they seek out this information and they're active and outgoing. Whereas there are a lot of suggestions showing that gamification is probably more effective for the weaker patient groups. So gamification is basically about, well, gamification is behaviorism, and serious games tends to go more towards constructivism, which basically means that a serious game is basically doing a product that has game mechanics in it. So, for example, I'll make a game rehabilitation, whereas gamification would much more be about trying to gamify the stuff you already do, the interactions you're already doing, and do it in a subtle way so you won't see that you're getting manipulated or nudged, controlled, helped, depending on your worldview, in certain directions. So, for example, if you're going to the doctor at the right time, you'll get points. You'll get an account with the public saying, okay, you've done really well. You'll get a better time to call him. You won't only have 10 minutes, you get 15 minutes now because you're doing well. Those gamification you can see in the US is being used by the big corporations, not in the health sector yet. And they're very efficient in the weak and not so reflective target groups. But the stronger patients, they will look through these things and won't be manipulated so easily, or will get bored quite quickly. So I think there are different tools in the toolbox to use, and I think that games can actually be used for both target groups, but it's very different ways that you have to do with each of those target groups. And one big thing is that when you begin to talk about gamification, it gets really, really dangerous and tricky, because what you're basically doing is you're changing people's behavior very directly. So there's this very famous example of babies having speeding limitations. So it was set up in Sweden, and you changed it so you have how fast do you drive, and you get a ticket. You get a ticket for driving too fast, but you also participate in the lottery for those who got the tickets, and that reduced the speed with 23%, which was a great experiment. But in another situation, you put in a plant in the dashboards of cars, and those people that buy these hybrid cars, they want to get this beautiful flower and drive economically and everything. So they drive, and then they come out on the highway, and they don't want to drive fast because then their flower will die. So they drive slowly on the highway. So you had these people driving around 40 kilometers on the highway, which was dangerous basically. So that people will do strange stuff for very small rewards, at least in some conditions. And then some people will see through it at some point, and some people will for a longer time behave basically like rats. We're more than rats, but to a large extent we have a lot of rat behavior in us still. So
I think we should really end on that point. Anybody got any? I think we're out of questions. We're running out a little bit of time now, I think. So, anybody got any last points they want to make apart from the rat point? I think that's the last point today. Thank you very much to the panel. I think there's some really interesting discussions there, and they'll be available on the internet later for you to watch yourselves. And I'm going to wrap up today's session with a description of the next event, which is InnoEvent. This is happening on week 12, which is from the 19th to 25th of March. And it will be happening between two venues, which will be the MMD campus down in Munkesbergvej. I got the right name. And I think UCL. We will watch the website for more information about that. But for those of you who don't know about InnoEvent, it's quite an occasion. We have about this year 750 students partaking in this event. And it's a collaboration between the EAL and the Multimedia Design School, businesses, and mainly OHO. And this year the topic is patient safety. It's 1 week, and during this 1 week we kind of mix all the students up. So it's students from all different parts of the education. We've in fact this year got nurses, so it's going to be very exciting for the multimedia design students. I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. They have 1 week of working together. It's fueled by pizzas, coffee, whatever, anything else they get their hands on. It's 24 hours a day, and it culminates And it basically, we have on hand members from OHO and business to guide the students and give them advice, as well as staff from the Multimedia Design School. And the idea is that the students have to build a prototype on the subject of patient safety. So we get them building all kinds of crazy stuff. Last year we had students going out and getting helium tanks for some unknown reason and wiring up exercise bikes. It's quite interesting what they can come up with. Sometimes some of the ideas are a little bit ropey, but sometimes there are some fantastic projects in there. And we've had real success in the past of actually taking some of these projects and turning them into reality. The USB stick has been one of them, the incubator. There are many of these projects, and hopefully this year, with so many people partaking, we're going to have even better ideas coming out. And this leads on to workshop 3. And if you would like to come along to this, please send me an email. It's on the website, and we'll see if we have spaces. This is fairly limited. Now, the idea of this is we're going to take the best ideas from Innovent. We're going to have clinicians and businesses at this event, and the idea is we're going to try to make these things into proper products. We need to take these from sort of prototype stage through to full-on production. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to have a big meal. And I think meals are a really good way of making anything happen. So we're having 6 courses, 6 groups of students. On each table we'll have clinicians and business people, and for each course the students have to hop to each table to sell their ideas. So not only are they having their stomachs stuffed with beautiful food, they're getting to sort of hot knob with everybody. And there'll be plenty of alcohol, which will always help. So that's the idea of the last event. Clearly on the last course people might be sort of not so coherent, but I think it should be quite a fun evening. Again, I'd like to thank all the panel here for taking in part. I'd like to thank all the exhibitors and the speakers. And I hope... Sorry? And the lovely helpers. Yes, they always get overlooked. Thank you for the lovely helpers filming today. We have one applause.